The Hamas group and Israel are at war, and in order to fully understand the deep-seated issues between them, you would need to go back at least 100 years, and that's what makes it so complicated. We're taking a look at what is currently happening in Gaza, who Hamas and the Israel Defense Force are, how the media are covering it, and the US and Western involvement in Israel. Although there is no specific border dividing the two, a split is clear. The mainstream media treats the conflict as a war between two equal powers, rather than an occupation of Gaza by Israel. In order to cover both sides, we'll first address who is fighting and the powers that they have. Hamas emerged with a commitment to destroying Israel and are considered by the US, UK, EU and Israel as a terrorist group. In April 2014, they made a deal with Fatah, the faction ruled by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, ruling over the West Bank, to form a national unity government. Many ask whether Palestinians in the Gaza Strip want Hamas fighting on their behalf. It is important to note here that Hamas were democratically elected to lead the Palestinian people the last time there was a Palestinian-wide vote. Hamas are accused of using civilians as human shields and placing rockets in residential areas. Both counts are unverified. It has also been said that civilians choose to act as human shields to defend their homes. Hamas has made no secret of its policy of encouraging them to do so, but whether they do it because of encouragement or personal choice is unclear. When it comes to rocket placement, it could be argued that there aren't many places to put them in such an urban dense place as the Gaza Strip. Hamas are known for domestically producing their own weaponry and have built their own anti-tank missiles and rocket-propelled grenades. Reportedly, they are currently attempting to strike a deal with North Korea to acquire more weaponry. On Israel's side are the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, who launched Operation Protective Edge on July 7th, claiming a single goal of stopping Hamas from their rocket barrages. Following accusations that blame fell on Hamas for the kidnapping and subsequent death of 3 Israeli teens, a severe escalation in both Israeli aerial and navy weaponry and Hamas's rocket firing took place. The IDF have the Iron Dome missile defense system, which I'll talk about later on when it comes to the US involvement in Israel. According to the Military Balance 2014, the Israeli army has around 176,500 active personnel and 565,000 reserve, making it the 34th largest army of military and paramilitary personnel in the world. Israel began the ground offensive in mid-July, saying it was necessary to stop Hamas from using secret passages coined terror tunnels, which they apparently used to sneak into Egypt and Israel. These tunnels are being destroyed with the help of Israeli airstrikes. When it comes to lives lost during the conflict, the IDF death toll when this video was made stood at 43 military and 3 civilians, according to the Protection Cluster. The Gaza death toll has surpassed 1,000, with 6,233 left injured. Hundreds in that death toll include innocent children. And it's not just the death toll to consider in Gaza. Over 200,000 people have been left displaced, taking solace in UNRWA emergency shelters, government schools, public buildings, or with friends and relatives. And then there's the children left behind through loss of family through death, injury or the loss of their home, which currently totals around 164,000. A 12-hour ceasefire by the UN allowed the recovery of bodies and the delivery of basic supplies. But despite ceasefire being extended, rockets were reportedly still being fired towards Israel, and the IDF retaliated. Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu rejected the extended ceasefire presented by US State Secretary John Kerry.
If Hamas rejects the Egyptian proposal and the rocket fire from Gaza does not cease, and that appears to be the case now, we are prepared to continue and intensify our operation to protect our people.
Most recent reports fall on Israel shelling a UN shelter at a school on the northern Gaza Strip. While some believed Israeli tanks fired at the school, others, including the US Ambassador of Israel, Ron Dermer, argued that the media is not connecting the dots, and that the blast could have been caused by Hamas using the school to hide rockets. Israeli Army spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner has since confirmed that it unintentionally hit the UN school, but denies that anyone was killed during the incident. Officials from the United Nations and the Palestinian government say 16 people were killed. When it comes to the US and Western involvement in the Gaza conflict, there are a few topics worth discussing. Firstly, the US were the only country in the world that voted against the UN investigating human rights violations in Gaza, with the UK and other Western countries abstaining from the vote altogether. According to a Congress report on US foreign aid to Israel from Jeremy M. Sharp, a specialist in Middle Eastern affairs, he says to date the United States has provided Israel $121 billion current or non-inflation adjusted dollars in bilateral assistance, with almost all of the aid coming in the form of military assistance. To look deeper into the weaponry that this goes towards, I put a link to the report in the description below. The most prominent of weaponry is Israel's Iron Dome system, which I mentioned earlier. The Iron Dome is designed to intercept very short-range rockets and could be a catalyst in the lopsided casualty rate. Sharp estimates over $704 million has been given to Israel to fund Iron Dome batteries, interceptors, co-production costs and general maintenance. And it works both ways. The Israeli government has also agreed to spend more than half the $235 million signed over by Barack Obama on January 17, 2014 for the Iron Dome system in the US. So where does the conflict between Israel and Hamas go from here? Gaza was already a vulnerable and unstable state before this began, and the damage and destruction in the northeastern portion of Gaza, shown in this satellite image, illustrates the effect the war has had. There is hope to end the bloodshed, but a resolution to the situation is far off. A recent Pew poll showed an increasing pessimism in the Israelis and Arabs about whether the two could live peacefully side by side. Ceasefires so far have proven temporary. What do you think will happen now? Is there a solution to the conflict? Let me know in the comments below. See you next time.